doing, we were actually having a call with the international DAMA board members. And what we're trying to do is trying to set up a body in Kenya that is going to look at data-related matters. So you may be the first audience to listen to this, but there's a 99% likelihood we're going to have DAMA Kenya very soon. So people are interested in data. You'll also have a community now that you can be able to discuss and learn about data matters. My name is Hashnell. I think, I don't know where the slides are. You can cue them. Awesome. So this is a topic that I was assigned, not selected. I didn't select this one. And I like this type of conferences because these days you no longer choose the best topic you can speak to. You are assigned. You are an expert. You have to be able to speak to anything. But I liked it. Protect your data and choose the company you keep. Very interesting. And I know I've attended some of these conferences. I've spoken about the Data Privacy Act, Data Protection Act, GDPR. Some of you are already protection officers or privacy officers, and you also have a mandate to ensure that you're having secure data in the organization. I'm going to talk about something very different today. What happens after the assignment? You are in an ecosystem. You're not only supposed to be protected as a company, you also require your third parties to be protected. So I'm going to focus mostly on how you're going to interact with your third parties, and you're going to see some interesting insights on what you should do if you're not doing going forward. So I'll dive into my introduction. Tech data space, 14 years. Now a data specialist. Happy to see some people I've worked with. For me, unfortunately, dived into data some way earlier years when people didn't know about analytics and all this. So I've been privileged to hire more than 130 or 150 data people in the country. Specialty, business intelligence, AI, data science, modern analytics, data management, and governance. So look at enterprise. I'm very passionate about this because I think it's only in SA that you're seeing now more than 100 chief data officers. I believe we got the second one last year in the insurance sector, but we still need more enterprise data people going forward. So third-party protection. And as I mentioned, you have done everything right. You have been appointed as a data protection officer. You have posted on LinkedIn and gotten 10,000 views. We're very happy. So what are the concerns when you're dealing with third parties? I think the first thing you're supposed to do, you told your procurement team, please review the contracts and ensure that they have the right kind of terms, legal terms to protect us. And you send them a nice checklist and ask, do you have a protection officer? And they said, yes, we do have one. Do you have a policy? They said, yes. How many people got a no for any of the protection or privacy questions from their third parties? So was it genuine? Oh, you got a no. Interesting. Interesting. That's a honest third party. So most people from the checks we are doing, we're actually having everything in place. And it's not true. I won't lie to you. Because you have three types of occurrences. One, third parties are already serving you, so they're afraid of losing business. Two, new third parties who don't know what's happening and want to find out how to ensure they are complying to your guidelines to get the business. And three, people are open, and I like that. These are the gaps you have. How do we partner to ensure that we are compliant? So as a company, and here you're speaking as a controller, not a processor, you may be both. The first thing you have to understand that you'll always have limited control on the data you give to your controllers. You may have the legalities in place, but you'll always have limited control. Number two, you will have different cultures. If you're working for top-tier banks, you'll have all the roles in place, 10 policies to do with privacy and protection. But what about the guy offering security? I won't mention names. Do they have what you have? Do they have the culture of protecting information? Is it the same kind of stringent check within the organization with regards to data privacy and protection? Number three is awareness. We may say that we know about GDPR, the Privacy Act, but if you actually follow through, few third party or few partners actually know the detail of what needs to be done. Number four is obviously what you heard about, cyber security. It's becoming a real threat, a real risk. You may have all the safeguards as a controller. You have to ensure you have the same by the processor. And the last one is obviously recourse. It's how much? What is the charge? 5 million and what? 2% of your turnover, whichever is lower or higher. It's lower. I don't know why they said lower. I think it's a typo. It's supposed to be higher. But do you really believe that you have a budget or a provision to pay for data privacy penalties? How many have a provision? How many? Nobody. So there's no recourse. If the controller or the processor loses your data, you start the process of reporting and investigating, but is there liability in place, tangible, whereby money has been set aside based on your operational risk assessment? So I'll dive you straight into what you should do when you are actually trying to have the right safeguards in place. And the first scenario is you have just gotten your job, your third party has reported yes to all your questions. If this is an existing third party, I'll give you a very simple process. A few steps, but very simple. Let's go back to slides. This is it. It's a capability building process map. And why it's important is because you as the controller of data, you may have done everything right, but when you're speaking to your partners, it is not a matter of showmanship. It's a matter of collaboration. So scenario one, you have existing service providers. They don't have the right data safeguards in place. This is the process of collaborating with them. Step number one is mapping. What data do you receive from us? How do you document what is the metadata? Step number two, how long do you retain it? Is it in compliance to your industry-specific retention laws or our specific retention laws? Step number three, that's step number three. So after you've gotten the mapping, you have a register, you have the retention period. Number four is the impact assessment. And I like it, and I'll double click on impact assessment because it's very, very interesting to see how it's done differently. But what you're supposed to do is that once you've understood these are our elements of data, you have a clear register. You know exactly how it's stored and how long it's stored. Then you have to run an impact assessment. What are the risks that can fall onto this data and how do we safeguard it? The agreements come next because you don't want to sign contracts and say that everything is fine before checking if you are actually safeguarding. Because you can pause there and try and correct. Data breach agreements and processes. We have to set this up. What does the law say? It says that the processor should report to the controller in how many hours? We are in a security summit. I hope I'm not in the wrong summit. 48 hours, yeah? So you have 48 hours. And from where you stand as a controller, you have 72 hours to report to the commissioner. But where is the breach process? How many have a breach process with their suppliers for security and food? So people have been having the DPA, said you're fully implemented, your LinkedIn has 10,000 new followers, yeah? Okay, fine. So you have to come up with a breach process, and it should be very clear. What happens? Who is communicated? What is the escalation matrix? Because once you start sharing data with third parties, then something may happen. You have to know what is the reaction. Do they report to you not in 48 hours, but maybe in 24 or 12? Do you have a system or a log where all this is recorded? You have to put that in place. Slide, please. So, the rest are just key things that most of the should have. So, designing your privacy policy, data protection officer, which is step number 8. Statements, have someone who is actually checking the forms. If you're saying you're having consent forms, check the design of the forms. Because if they're able to have the right kind of consent on their end, they'll do the same for your side. And over the day, you have now a clear way of tracking how privacy is handled from the third party. Scenario number 2, you actually have someone who has said, I have checked all your checkbox items and I am okay. How should you confirm? What are the 8 key areas you should always look at when you're trying to assess that my third party is not lying to me? Simplistic. Are they communicating data privacy within the organization? Simple check. Do you have trainings, awareness sessions on privacy? Because if everyone is aware of GDPR and data privacy in your third-party company, you stand a better chance. Number 2, personal data. PII, how is it stored? How is it handled? So if you ask them to give you a clear list of PII logged information or CBEs, and what are the safeguards for PII information, if they're able to produce that within the same day, you're good. Procedures, can they at least show you a policy? Is there a document that you can actually check out of the meeting and look at and say, you know what, these guys actually have the right kind of policy with regards to, it might be comprehensive based on what you're looking at, but it's clear. Access rights management, for those who have been auditors like me, we usually get so many findings on access. ID name, yes? I didn't know you were an auditor. I was an IT auditor with KPMG at some years back. And access is very important. If someone does not review roles and responsibilities, access assignments, access recertifications, if you're not doing that, red flag. Next one is what? Customer consent. Where are the forms? Give me 3 sample fill forms of consent for your own data that you collect from your customers. If you don't have that, question mark. Breaches. Do you have either a breach policy or an example of how you have had near misses or handle an actual breach? If you ask these questions to anyone who's your service provider and has the right kind of answers, you're going somewhere. Then the last 2 are the impact assessment and the human being called the data protection officer in his nice suit. So if he's there and he's able to answer your questions and opens the door for you with regards to privacy, you're happy. Now, scenario 1, someone who you're not sure about, guiding them through. Scenario 2, someone who's a bit mature, checking them. But there is something very interesting called right to audit, which I see most people feeling in their agreement. That since we are giving you our data, we have the right to audit. So how do you conduct the audit? How do you check, either through a scheduled audit cycle or an abrupt audit, that things are happening in the right way? So I'll give you the simple process. This is the simplistic audit process that you can ever find. No offense to the big 4, if there are any in the room. I know it's usually 4 million to do this work. And what usually happens is that you have a proper bill and, 2 months. So the first thing is obviously your initial assessment. And when you're doing a simple audit, it's just checking. From the things I showed you in the last 2 slides, how is the lay of the land? Start from the policy, understand what it dictates. Check 3 things. Test of design. How is the policy designed? Number 2 is test of implementation. Your policy says you're supposed to do awareness communications every 2 weeks. Get an example of awareness communication. And the last one is test of operating effectiveness. Is the awareness being understood? Or is it the most technical awareness email you've ever seen in your life? Number 2, impact assessment. Again, it's coming up. Mapping the data elements and knowing the risks and checking the possibility of materialization of this risk. It's very important. But this time, you won't just finish that and actually stop there. You'll actually go a step further and see how can you actually treat this risk. Is it acceptable? Is it a no-go zone? They have to fix it immediately. It will still make its way in the audit report, but how do you treat it immediately? Monitoring and compliance. Continuous audit, continuous monitoring. You have to find a way, or they have to showcase a way for you to monitor what was discovered and how to ensure that it does not recur. As you're auditing, you also have to audit the data breach management process. You can simulate one. I've seen very excellent simulation scenarios for different sectors. I can share the link. And you can actually simulate what happens during a data breach and how do people actually handle that. The last 2 is action management, and you finalize with your report. Very simplistic, but the big 4 are still here. You can talk to them. So we have talked about privacy impact assessment. I'll give you 2 key examples of impact assessments. This is a very simplistic one. You can get complex one. Actually, a big 4 one. It is a big 4 one. Yeah. Very simple impact assessment process because all of the validation for your existing suppliers has that. Your audit cycle has that. So this is simply how you actually describe it. You have to identify, do I really have a need for a privacy impact assessment? Now, I have to differentiate an audit and an impact assessment. An impact assessment happens when there is any kind of suspicion that any process, activity, or change in an organization can create a data privacy or protection risk. It doesn't have to wait for the audit. You can actually launch it immediately. And this is a very high-level view. I'll just show you the 5 or 6 steps. Get the need, find the flaws, identify the CDEs, map the risks, get the solutions to the risks, record, monitor, and track. Very simple. You can take a photo and maybe look at it. But the one that really is exciting for me is this one. The ones that actually come from system changes. And it's something very silent because you know what? There is no system that is not patched. There is no system that is not upgraded. There are no changes in any enterprise systems. So do you run impact assessments for all the system changes in your third parties? You get a report. It's an interesting article I was looking at that was speaking about this, and somebody said it's actually a nightmare. Because if you think about how you can get privacy breaches, it can originate from some intern in your third-party company not following the proper change plan and introducing a risk. Then you'll ask yourself, how do I proactively prevent that? It's an impact assessment based on system audits. So it's a very clear process. There's a new system. There's a new change in the existing system. The first thing you have to do is what? Document. So you have to employ yourself or embed this in the existing system changes. Or boards, CAB. Ensure that you actually have the right kind of checkoff. Do you have a proper privacy impact assessment on systems. So again, I won't go through all of them. I think you can take a photo and just go and revise for yourself, but it's very simple again. System, privacy target, degree, risks on the privacy targets, recommend solutions, follow through the solutions, document, report, repeat. So now your job is getting interesting because now you're wondering, okay, have I checked any, do I know even the systems that my security companies use? But I have a right to audit clause in the contract. It's very nice. I'm waiting for the day a breach happens and I'll audit. It's more about being proactive than reactive. So, how do you actually ensure that also the same is followed for your storage companies? And I saw the very nice bullet point under this topic talking about how do you store data, how exactly do you ensure that there are no risks in the same. You'll do everything else, but these are very clear. I think people have seen this chart before. It's by ESG, and they talk about how do you have the right kind of security for cloud storage. And they're having different types of areas. So from information governance, user infrastructure, and look at the different boxes you have to actually tick off. I think you being security people, you have done all of them. Then there's an additional box which is coming, and that's it. So what about destruction? So you've done everything, you're happy. What about digital shredding? Do you have it in your contract? Porting data out of your jurisdiction just requires consent and notification of the DPC. And since it's early days, you'll get a yes. Obviously. Then after that, what? What if you no longer want to have data in that cloud region existing anymore? Do you know the procedure of digital shredding? So very exciting conversations happening on this when you look at cloud security, destruction, demagnetization, shredding the actual hard disk. So people are coming up with different ways of looking at this. So it's something you actually have to research. So how do you ensure that you are having the right kind of procurement documents? I will just go through quickly this. You have to ensure that you request, in addition to the service you're requesting, that's why I call it supplier obligations when you're speaking to data privacy and protection. User minimization. You're not supposed to use data for more than what you're asking for. They have to showcase ability to do this. Transparency and openness. Are they going to be the ones who send their very tough lawyer and they'll say, we don't want to be audited? That's the first red flag. What do you want to audit? Red flag. Security. I won't speak to that. Standards. I've spoken enough about that. Regular reviews and reporting. Are they allowing you to actually see the internal audit reports with regards to security? And how do you actually ensure that you have this in place? Data subject requests. How are they handling requests for destruction from their end as processors? Awareness. I've mentioned about this. And lastly, the right to audit. You have to ensure that you have these 8 elements. In all, not some, but all of your procurement documents must be updated as soon as possible. So, I want to show you a comparison because if you look at now most security guiding principles, and I got some, I was speaking to Dama when I started. This is the Dama wheel. Has been there for many years. 2017 still looks very, very new. Not changed a lot. And has everything. Then on the right, there is the security data governance wheel. I have been waiting, and that's why I'm pushing for Dama to actually have presence here, to actually update this wheel, because I use it. We actually have all these checkboxes within data, but where are we missing out on the right wheel? The security wheel, which looks at what? Rights, encryption, cloud access, governance analytics, classification. Not properly brought out in the first Dama wheel, but you require to intersect these two wheels if you're going to have a proper data management. Now, you have your data protection officer. The law is very clear. Business users are the people who implement. How do you ensure that the DPO is not stretched? Because most people are saying, I have the policy in place, I have the DPO, we are happy. How do you ensure that people know exactly what to do? That's where data privacy and data management intersect. The officer is a second line person. And for him to actually be able to do, or her, to be able to do the right work, they are supposed to be checkers and not drivers. I don't know if you're getting me. The protection officer is to check and ensure embedment. He's a second line person. The first line is your business. For us as bankers, do your branch managers actually know about all these things I'm speaking about? So how do you ensure that you're having the right kind of support structure to support the first line responsibility of data security, privacy? You can come up with champions. Very easy one. Train them, go around and do all that. But I will actually recommend having clear responsibilities that intertwine with regards to data management. So there's a common first line and second line. With regards to data management, you have your executive data sponsor, data steward, and system steward or platform steward. You have your second line, which is the CDO, governance lead, quality lead, architect, and lastly, who? The privacy officer. He must be able to join the operationalization of data steerco for this to work. I'm happy to discuss this. How do you also ensure that you have the right kind of conversations? Do you want to create a different type of privacy organizational mandate, or do you want to embed it to existing management processes? So privacy these days, after the hype of everyone having a DPO, we're now back to business. So how do you make it work? What I've seen working is embedding it to the data governance oversight pyramid. And for you who have not seen it, this is it. Very simple. Down there, it's called domain level governance. Every 2 weeks, you have to have people conversing about data, quality, privacy, engineering, architecture, analytics, reporting. Privacy should be part of that conversation. Every 1 month, the head of data should actually chair a meeting that looks at data across different elements, privacy included. And every quarter, you have to have your senior leadership discussing these privacy matters. Because if you don't do this, you'll be left with your DPO waiting for a breach to occur. Thank you. I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much, Hartnett, for that. It feels like an MBA in 20 minutes, doesn't it?
I'm sorry.
Yeah. We can actually take 1 or 2 questions, if there are any. Yeah, just come here. 1 or 2 questions.
Okay. So my question is for DPO for an organization. What would you say is the role of automation, and what could be some of the tools that a DPO or a privacy team could use to manage their data protection?
Let's take the other one, then Hartnett, you can take both. Yeah, the other guy on the other side. Yeah.
So my question is not for Mr. Hartnell, and I think for the entire community, because I know some of you might look at me badly for asking this, but I'm going to ask either way. So we're speaking about data privacy security, and you've mentioned about breaches. And when the summit started, someone mentioned that many of us in the room have been compromised one way or another. But you'll find that in Kenya and Africa as a whole, when communities or companies get breached, none of us actually report the breaches, which is not the same case for Europe and abroad. So it's very easy to read reports about breaches for very many companies, but not local companies. So how do we as a community change that? Because it's within those reports that we're able to identify how do we mitigate or prevent such breaches from occurring. Thank you.
Good question. Yep. How's your RAM?
I can try and remember all of it.
Okay.
It's working.
It's working.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you for the presentation. I thought I was in a master's class somewhere. Content was very rich. So question, for the big organizations, we've already started with the DPO processing and all that registration. What about small enterprises? Maybe I have a briefcase company somewhere. Where do we start?
Okay. Any other?
I think let's go with that.
I'll start in reverse order. Every company requires the role of data privacy and protection, but not the FT, not the function, not the person. For your briefcase company, I'm sure you don't have a risk officer, you don't have a CIO, you don't have a head of security, but you know what is bare minimum required to actually ensure that you don't get yourself in legal suits. So what you have to do, number one, is awareness. I think understanding what the guidelines are, in simple terms, is usually about consent, ensuring that you're following the 8 guidelines of GDPR. Don't process more than what you're collecting it for. Be transparent. Allow people to request to correct the data if there are quality issues. Allow people to port their data or review their data. So if you actually simplify this, you'll find that you only have around 10 to 15 activities to do. Now, for people like us as banks, you have to tick them all. So it goes to up to 60, 70 key activities you have to do. So for small organizations, I know there's still discussion with the VPC with regards to do they also need, but we don't even have to wait for that. The same question asking yourself, do you require a CIO if you're a tenderpreneur? I think you just need to understand what are the key elements and know how to embed them. Now, sometimes you have to look at what is the risk here. Whether you have a person called a DPO or not, it's about not getting yourself having a materialized risk. So if you as the only employee or your 3-man team assign the role to someone and actually be able to. And this also falls in line to fintechs and startups because you're starting out lean. You really want the CEO is the one who does marketing and also does business development. The CTO can take up some of these roles. But as you grow and the risks expand, then you actually have to have a proper design. I'm worried about the question because we are already in Africa and there are breaches. And there was an attempt, I won't mention names, to find some financial organization, some amount based on a data breach, but it did not go through. I don't know how this will sound if I say it, but we did not invent our own clothes, in suits. They came from the West. If it's happening in the West, it's going to land here. So, for me, I say learn from someone else before you have to learn it yourself. There are multiple cases. Actually, there is a glossary of more than 1,000 fines delivered relating to GDPR. Just go online. Actually, it's a single website showing you who are the people who have ever been fined and what was the case and the ruling. It's a place you can actually learn. We may be at the level whereby you're not having very major breaches, and I can correct this. It's not because they are not happening. It's because the data subjects are not aware yet. If you hear somebody lost some data, if you call the bank and say, was my data part of that? Nobody. So it's because we are still, and I like the example given by the previous gentleman who was speaking, that we're still at the level of really understanding this, that we don't mind leaving our IDs without asking questions. Because you should ask, leave your ID and give me a form. Tell me, I consent leaving my ID, and you will take responsibility with regards to GDPR or data privacy. So we're not put in there yet, and I won't call it because of the population of people skilled and those ones who are not skilled, but I believe it's something coming. So the same way it took time for GDPR to spill over into African governments, then I think it's going to take some time. But I will be happy if you have all the safeguards, because you don't want again to fail when you actually get yourself in that scenario. Someone wants to chime in?
I just wanted to help Hartnet to answer your question, not from a data perspective, but from normal hacking perspective in the banking sector. The banking sector is highly regulated by the Central Bank of Kenya, and I was mentioning something about the prudential guidelines of 2015, right? So every CISO, every head of cybersecurity in all banks are expected to report a breach within 24 hours from the time it happens, immediately after you've done your assessment. You're supposed to send the Central Bank of Kenya your findings and how it happened and what the magnitude of the loss. There's also quarterly reporting that is done, and there's, every quarter, whether there is a breach or not, all banks in Kenya must report a breach. It's already happening. We are just not loud about it for obvious reasons, because the last time you guys had that water poured on Chase Bank's floor, you all removed your money. You get? So there's that kind of thing that the reputational risk that the banks are also trying to deal with. But every bank reports. They're just not loud about it. It will not be on primetime news. And then every quarter, the BFIU, Banking Fraud Investigative Unit, also collects a report through the Kenya Bankers Association. They send to all banks the reports of all the hacks and all the frauds that happen within a quarter. It's just not coming to you people. It's not Nation newspaper. It's not Standard newspaper. It goes to the right hands for those who need to know, again, for the obvious reasons, so that we have that reputation kept. But yes, from the cybersecurity side, it's already happening. There is already reporting within 24 hours from the time of the breach. There's quarterly reporting. And then there's a collection of reports that is sent back to the banks. All banks that are members of the Kenya Bankers Association get a quarterly report of all the breaches that happened within a particular quarter. So we are not so far off. It's already here with us. It started, let's say, 4 or 5 years back. We do it every quarter.
Thank you.
Now, that is the thing. I don't know what is happening in the insurance sector and the other sector. Maybe Jubilee might tell us, but in the banking sector, we know that we are mandated, especially because of the money factor. Whenever there is a hack and money has been lost, in fact, they put the financial amount to it. How were you hacked? Was it internal, insider threat, like I was telling you? Most of the hackings are happening because of you guys giving information or you guys doing something internally. So you give how the hack happened, how you covered your tracks, and the financial figure that was lost. We report to CBK every quarter. Yeah.
For Sasra and thanks. For Sasra, the other cooperatives and also you see. Remember I talked about Aki. They are getting there. We didn't have data experts or specialties in data existing in the insurance sector because we had our actuaries. They could do everything. But now you require data skills because of how data is becoming a competitive advantage. I like the third question or the second question because you asked about tools. I'll take two. For systems, you require actually more systems. I've seen two developed after obviously GDPR. What do? They help you trace your key risks, the indicators of the risks and the controls. And they also have a clear process flow how you run impact assessments. But guess what? You also speak to data quality when you're talking about data protection. So again, you also have to get dashboards from your data team and your BI team speaking to quality, consistency, access, who uses what data for what purpose, analytics, who analyzes data and to what use case. Did we really get consent for this? So the key one will have a very centralized system for yourself to manage identification of data privacy risks, how to have controls to them, how to monetize the operational risk, and how to run assessment. and also reporting. But you will require other tools across the enterprise. Thank you so much for time.